Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are taking you on a journey to explore, well, the ultimate origin story of political power.
It is a massive topic.
It really is. And what we have on the table in front of us is this incredibly rich dossier of sources. We're primarily looking at a fascinating documentary script. It's titled Myths, Gods, and the Birth of Authority.
Right. And alongside that,
Oh, yeah, we have these amazing notes detailing how those exact historical themes map onto the fictional universe of San Vitae, The Awakening.
exactly. So our mission for this deep dive is essentially an excavation of the human psyche.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. We're going to uncover exactly how ancient humanity first invented this whole concept of the divine right to stabilize early, really fragile societies.
Because they were incredibly fragile back then.
Right. And we need to explore the deep-seated psychological cravings that made us buy into these systems in the first place.
The things that made us, want to believe it.
Yes. And crucially, examine what happens to a civilization when the people finally realize that they built these sacred, unquestionable systems completely from scratch.
Now that you know where we're headed, I want you to just picture this for a second. Put yourself there. You are standing in the middle of a vast ancient desert. The sun is just blazing down on you.
Sounds intense.
Right. And in front of you, this massive stone temple rises out of the sand, just completely defying the harsh landscape. There are priests chanting, and you can literally feel the low frequency of that sound vibrating in your chest.
Setting the scene.
Yeah. And then a king steps forward. He is draped in heavy gold, catching that harsh light. Instantly, an entire crowd of thousands around you drops to their knees, as one.
Total submission.
Exactly. The silence is deafening. Before there were written laws to cite, before there were defined nations with borders, before there were kings holding secular power as we understand them today, there were stories. And the stories chose who ruled.
It's just such an arresting image to start with because it captures that exact threshold where human imagination literally bends physical reality.
It changes everything.
Right.
Oh.
When thousands of people kneel in the sand, you are looking at the absolute genesis of political power. It's not just a display of wealth. It is a display of engineered reality.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because when you look at the historical record provided in our sources, it is almost eerie.
Eerie is a good word for it.
You have these completely disconnected civilizations. They are separated by vast oceans and, in some cases, thousands of years, right? Yet they arrive at the exact same strategy for establishing unquestionable authority.
The exact same one.
It's like the ultimate ancient public relations campaign. I mean, if you want people to follow your rules, you don't stand up and say you wrote them. You tell everyone the universe itself handed you the script.
And what's really fascinating here is how uniform the mechanics of that public relations campaign actually were. Let's dig into the 3 historical case studies detailed in our dossier, because they show us the how of this whole process. First, consider ancient Egypt.
Okay.
The pharaoh wasn't just like a political ruler sitting at the top of a bureaucracy. They were a living, breathing god.
Literally a god on earth.
Right. But it wasn't just a title. Their authority was framed around this concept of Mat, or basically cosmic harmony.
So it wasn't just about, collecting a grain tax or organizing a military draft.
Oh, far from it. The narrative was that the pharaoh was the only thing standing between the ordered world and absolute terrifying chaos.
Wow.
Yeah, if the pharaoh failed, or if the people defied the pharaoh, the sun literally might not rise. The Nile might not flood to water the crops.
So imagine being an ancient Egyptian farmer under that system. I mean, the stakes are existential.
Totally.
You aren't just rebelling against a guy in a gold hat. You are rebelling against the laws of physics. If you don't pay your tribute, you aren't just a criminal. You're practically responsible for the end of the world.
That is the exact mechanism of control. It's brilliant in a dark way. Now let's travel over to ancient Mesopotamia.
Okay, different vibe.
Right. The theological mechanism shifts slightly here, but the societal result is pretty much identical.
How so?
Well, kingship in Mesopotamia wasn't usually framed as the king being a literal god. It was more about holding a sacred office bestowed by the divine council.
Ah, like an appointment.
Exactly. Rulers claimed to receive physical clay tablets of destiny from the gods, and they used this concept of direct divine instruction to justify very earthly, mundane decisions.
Right, it's the ultimate deflection of blame. Like, listen guys, I didn't want to raise your taxes, but the sky god and Lil sent down a tablet and my hands are tied.
Right. It creates a complete bureaucratic shield. And then, look at the third case study. Japan.
The unbroken lineage.
Yes. The dossier highlights how the imperial line historically traced an unbroken genetic lineage directly back to the sun goddess Amaterasu.
Which is wild.
Right. And how does that function on a daily basis? It
Hmm.
creates a social hierarchy that cascades all the way down to the lowest level of society.
Okay, I see.
If the emperor is a direct descendant of the sun, then the local lord appointed by the emperor is operating with a fragment of that divine mandate.
So, as a peasant, questioning the local tax collector is functionally the same as questioning the cosmos. You're trapped in a hierarchy that is it's baked into the DNA of reality.
Completely inescapable.
Across all these diverse cultures, the universal pattern rings out. The gods want this, therefore you must obey. But this brings up a huge question for me, and I want to push back on this a bit.
Okay, go for it.
Were these early elites just orchestrating a massive, cynical scam? I mean, were there high priests sitting in a smoke-filled back room saying, hey, let's invent a sun goddess so these gullible farmers build us some giant stone palaces?
Right.
Or did the isolation and raw terror of early human civilization mean they genuinely believed they were chosen?
I completely understand the instinct to view it as a cynical scam, especially from our modern vantage point. But the historical and psychological evidence actually suggests otherwise.
Really?
Yeah. You have to place yourself in the context of early human existence.
Yeah.
The natural world was terrifyingly unpredictable.
Right. No weather apps.
Exactly. A sudden drought, a massive flood, or an unexplained plague could literally wipe out your entire bloodline in a week. And there was zero meteorological or medical science to explain it.
So when someone steps up and actually manages to organize society against that chaos.
It felt like a literal miracle. I
Hmm.
mean, if a leader emerged who could successfully organize large-scale agriculture or coordinate a defense against a rival tribe or just build a granary that saved people from starving over the winter.
That's huge.
It is. And the human brain, which is essentially a meaning-making machine, needed to explain that incredible success.
You'd have to find a reason.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We naturally attribute incredible patterns of survival to a higher order. The leader likely believed they were channeling the divine just as much as the followers did.
So they were drinking their own Kool-Aid.
Basically, yeah. The theological belief system co-evolved right alongside the social structure. It wasn't some calculated trick. It was a genuine survival strategy.
That reframes things significantly. So it wasn't just physical force like spears and swords keeping people on their knees. It was a deep-seated psychological need.
Yes.
It was the masses willingly leaning into the story because the alternative, that human survival is entirely left to random chance, that a sudden frost is just bad luck rather than like a cosmic test that psychologically paralyzes.
It is. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, that is the crucial pivot in our sources. We've established how rulers claimed divine power, but why did the masses accept it so universally?
Right.
The dossier highlights that the human mind is biologically wired to crave three specific things. Predictability in a chaotic world, meaning behind suffering, and rigid order in social life.
And myth provides all of that.
Perfectly. Myth, as a social structure, perfectly provides all three.
So what does this all mean? We can almost think of myth as humanity's first major operating system update.
I like that analogy.
Right. We had the existential dread bug that was causing the human hardware to just freeze up in the face of nature. So early society patched it by installing a divine ruler program to keep the whole system from crashing.
That's spot on. And if myth is the operating system, then the daily rituals and sacrifices are like the software updates keeping it running smoothly.
That's good.
Myth is not just a simple fairy tale. It is a highly sophisticated, incredibly effective psychological technology designed to manage populations.
Wow.
Let's break down the psychological effects of living under divine authority. First, it drastically reduces anxiety. When human hierarchies, no matter how brutal they are, get framed as part of a grand cosmic plan, the heavy burden of uncertainty is lifted from the individual's shoulders.
You just know your place.
You know your place.
It's kind of like the twisted comfort of boundaries. Even if the boundary is oppressive, the human brain prefers a known cage to the absolute terror of the infinite unknown.
Precisely that. Second, this technology creates rigid moral certainty. Navigating ethical gray areas consumes a massive amount of cognitive energy.
It's exhausting.
Right. But when the gods have spoken through a king, the path is clear. You don't have to debate the morality of a war. The sun god commanded it.
Done deal.
Exactly. And third, and perhaps most importantly for maintaining an empire, it makes the act of obedience feel righteous.
Right, so you aren't just yielding to a stronger guy with a bigger army. You are actively participating in the divine order of the universe. Doing what you are told becomes an act of spiritual fulfillment.
What becomes a virtue?
But if we are biologically wired to seek comfort in these rigid structures, is it even possible for a society to exist without creating some version of a god to justify its rules?
That is the big question.
Because if we uninstalled that divine ruler program, wouldn't the societal hardware just crash again? I mean, we've seen secular societies try to strip religion away, and they often just end up worshiping the state or a political leader instead.
That raises a really important point, and it's the exact tension that sparked the historical philosophical rebellion against these ideas.
Because people started catching on.
Yeah, as human societies stabilized and gained a bit of distance from raw survival mode, philosophers began to notice the exact patterns we're discussing.
Like, wait a minute.
Right. They thought, if these myths are just technologies built to soothe human anxiety and manage large populations, how do we distinguish between an actual divine truth and a clever human invention?
Right, because if it's a technology, someone built it. And whoever builds the technology controls the user.
Absolutely. Let's look at the philosophical deconstruction of divine authority that our dossier outlines. Historically, this debate fractured into two main arguments.
Okay, let's hear them.
Argument one is the traditional view. The divine is an objective reality, and authority naturally flows downward from the heavens to human rulers.
The classic approach.
Right. But argument two, which began to emerge in antiquity, proposes that the divine is entirely constructed.
Constructed by us.
Yes. It is a mirror reflecting human fears, human hopes, and most importantly, human political needs.
The sources point to a really powerful philosophical conclusion here that spans centuries. I mean, it starts from ancient Greek thinkers like Xenophanes all the way up to 19th century philosophers like Ludwig Feuerbach.
Yes, exactly.
Xenophanes famously noted that if horses had hands and could draw, they would draw gods that looked exactly like horses.
Which is just a brilliant observation.
It really is. And Feuerbach formalized this into projection theory, the core idea being humans did not make gods in their image, they made gods in their own.
That single sentence, conceptually, it completely dismantles thousands of years of the divine right of kings.
It totally unravels it.
When you begin to accept that premise, you look back at history and realize that theology was frequently hijacked as a political tool. The dossier actually details the specific mechanisms of this hijacking.
Like what?
Well, for instance, chosen people narratives. They're explicitly used to justify the exclusion or outright conquest of neighboring tribes.
Right. If God loves us best, we are totally justified in taking your land.
It's the ultimate permission slip for atrocities.
Yeah.
Yes. Furthermore, the concept of sacred kingship is used to legitimize the extreme centralization of power and wealth into a single family line. And the concept of a divine mandate is deployed specifically to suppress internal dissent.
Because if the king's word is God's word, then protesting the king's tax policy isn't just treason against the state, it's blasphemy against the creator.
Exactly.
You aren't just breaking the law, you are breaking the universe.
When the gods speak, human rulers rule. It is an impenetrable shield against criticism.
Yeah.
Because you simply cannot debate policy with the cosmos.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
I'm ready.
If these gods are just mirrors reflecting human political needs, doesn't that fundamentally change how we view these ancient rulers?
Completely.
Doesn't that mean every time an ancient king loudly claimed a divine mandate, they were actually just confessing their own desperate desire for absolute control, like they were projecting their own deep-seated insecurity onto the cosmos?
That is a brilliant way to analyze it. A claim to divine right is essentially a forceful declaration that human debate is no longer valid.
Shutting it down.
Yeah, it is an attempt to end the conversation about how society should be run. And if you look closely at the historical record, the louder and more elaborate the claim of divine right becomes, the bigger the temples, the more extravagant the sacrifices.
Oh, weaker they actually are.
Exactly. The more insecure the actual human power structure usually was. It functions as psychological armor for a very fragile regime.
Which brings us organically to the fictional side of our source material.
Yes, San Vitae.
Right. Because if you want to see what happens when you take all these historical mechanisms, strip away the ancient dust, and build a perfectly controlled society from scratch, you have to look at the universe of San Vitae, The Awakening.
It's a perfect case study.
Our sources basically use this book as a laboratory to observe this exact dynamic in real time.
The societal structure built in San Vitae is truly a masterclass in the architecture of oppression. For context for you listening, the world is strictly divided into the Santerii, who are the elite ruling class, and the Humates, who are the subjugated underclass.
Right.
What the dossier points out so effectively is that the Santerii mythos functions identically to the ancient divine kingships we've been discussing.
Let's paint a picture of this for the listener, because the Santerii didn't just conquer the Humanis underclass with superior weapons and, put them in chains.
No, physical chains can be broken.
Exactly. Instead, they conquered the very nature of reality itself.
That is the insidious part. The Santerii utilize highly specific daily rituals, omnipresent symbols, and these sacred, unquestionable narratives to justify their absolute dominance over the population.
They weave it into everything.
Right. They have embedded the concept of their inherent superiority into the cultural and spiritual DNA of the city itself.
What?
The stark realization that the main characters in the book must face, and what our dossier highlights, is that the gods of San Vitae do not descend from the heavens. They rise directly from the very specific earthly needs of the powerful to maintain their control over the city's resources.
It's like living inside an inescapable walled garden, but the walls are made of beliefs, not stone.
That's a great way to put it.
The Santerii have built a reality where questioning the zoning laws of the city means questioning the literal fabric of existence.
Yeah.
So put yourselves in the shoes of a humanist character. How does a person even begin to rebel against an oppressor when the oppressor has convinced everyone, perhaps even themselves, that they are the embodiment of cosmic law?
That is the central tragedy and ultimately the central triumph explored in both the novel and in real human history.
How do they do it?
Well, rebellion in that highly controlled context requires a massive psychological rupture. It's not enough to just get angry at the tax rate. You have to experience something so undeniably contrary to the established cosmic law that the entire illusion just shatters.
The glass breaks.
Right. In psychology, we refer to this as severe cognitive dissonance. It's when the harsh reality you experience directly contradicts the comforting myth you've been conditioned to believe.
Like seeing the divine ruler bleed for the first time, or seeing the sacred rituals completely fail to stop a plague.
Exactly. When that gap between reality and myth becomes too wide to ignore, the myth breaks. And when the myth breaks, the oppressed individual experiences an awakening, hence the title of the book.
Ah, there it is.
They suddenly realize that the insurmountable walls around them aren't made of cosmic stone laid by the gods. They are made of human words.
And if they are made of human words, they can be rewritten.
That's the exact moment of liberation. Once you realize the gods of the system were invented by the human architects of the system, you stop fearing the gods and you start fighting the architects.
The authority just loses its sacred, impenetrable armor.
It just becomes a group of people hoarding power.
This has been such an illuminating journey through these sources. I mean, let's bring this all together. We started with the very real idea that myths gave early, terrified humans a vital, necessary way to explain and organize a chaotic world.
We needed it.
We desperately needed that psychological technology to survive the elements, to cooperate in massive numbers, and to build the foundations of civilization.
But the profound tragedy of human history is that those exact same survival myths were inevitably co-opted. They were transformed into psychological armor for the powerful elites.
Right.
Because, as our dossier states so clearly, when gods choose rulers, humans stop questioning them.
Yeah.
The tool for survival just became the tool for subjugation.
But the ultimate takeaway from unpacking all of this today is one of profound liberation. When we peel back the curtain and recognize that a myth is fundamentally human-made, whether we are talking about an ancient Egyptian sun goddess, the divine mandate of a Mesopotamian king, or the constructed mythos of the Santerii in a sci-fi novel authority, loses its sacred armor. The spell is broken and the individual becomes sovereign. You get to decide your own truth.
It is the monumental shift from being a passive subject of the cosmos to being an active author of your own reality.
We spent this entire deep dive talking about ancient gods, pharaohs in the desert, and fictional rulers in walled cities. But I want to leave you, the listener, with a question to chew on as you go about the rest of your day. We like to think we are completely beyond these ancient tricks. But if myths are simply human-made stories that we collectively agree to treat as unquestionable laws of nature, what are the modern secular myths that we are bowing down to today?
That's the real question.
Are there economic systems, unseen social structures, or complex technological algorithms that we treat as divine and unchangeable right now? And what happens to our society the day we wake up and realize that those systems are entirely human-made too? Think back to that temple in the desert. Stories chose who ruled. The question is, what story are you believing today?